The eyes of the NBA world were on the Toronto Raptors as the trade deadline came and went. OG Anunoby, Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, Gary Trent Jr. were all set to be available. The Raptors are comfortably outside the playoff picture. It was said that the Raptors were willing to rebuild around Scotty Barnes. Instead, they make a move that has a lot of people confused. What has become a bit of a trend with this front office, Masai Ujiri, Bobby Webster, over the last 3-4 years, and whether or not it's right or fair to start being extremely critical of this front office.
Back to the loser side, the Toronto Raptors. There's two reasons for this one. One, the Fred VanVleet thing, which again, we're going to talk about later. Obviously, it was too much money for Toronto to retain him. Houston having that much cap space just outbid them for what Fred VanVleet wanted.
James Harden all season long. That idea apparently got thrown out the window, and instead they gave Fred VanVleet a 3-year max contract worth $130 million, which in my opinion was a pretty gross overpay.
With the 13th pick in the 2023 NBA Draft, the Toronto Raptors select Grady Dick from the University of Kansas.
Perhaps the most interesting electric suit in the green room tonight, Grady Dick.
The intensity's crazy, atmosphere through the roof, so, you know, it's just prepared me to, like, the next time.
A talented team, like we have some really good point guard replacements already, like.
Yes. That comes.
Why Toronto, and can you walk us through the process of how you ended up on the Raptors?
Why Toronto? I mean, Darko, head coach, plays a big part of it. I think the day of free agency, he called me and he said, I'm a head coach now and I know how he operates. I've been with him in OKC. He's a great guy, European, and I think the situation as well.
If you're new around here, my name's Robert. This is Pinsari Basketball. Grab your coffee. Let's get to it.
Yeah, it didn't happen. A really rough stretch. Growth is not linear, so sometimes we've played a little selfish. We used to give them some chance. The playing at that time was the playing. I believe in the players. I believe in the coaching.
I believe in the organization. I believe in them individually. I believe in their talent.
There are times in the season when we got a little bit too individual.
Yeah, it's tough to, celebrate too much the victories. Went down to the end there, I think we knew what we were going to do. It would have been difficult for us to sign him in free agency. This group could go. It didn't make as much sense, but some of that chemistry come together with the team. The true evaluation, I think, for this team will be at the end of the season.
How you doing? It is Thursday night. Grab a beer and let's get to this. Look, it happens every year. You hear a report, this is what was offered, this is what happened, this is what's being offered in the trade, and it doesn't really hold any fact It's not a fact. It's a rumor. It's a report. Who leaked it? Who said it? That's really to each their own, right? I mean, you can't verify these things. It's all anonymous sources. I have read so many reports this summer. Two consistent things. Number one, the Raptors have failed free agency. They have failed the offseason. Pretty much the second Fred VanVleet signed that deal, it was over. It was curtains on Masai Ujiri. Reports that Masai Ujiri's job might not be as safe as once previously thought to be, despite winning a championship 4 years ago. What do you make of this? Another consistent report, which is pretty much widespread at this point, is that Scottie Barnes is a bust. It's insane to me that Hoop Reference has him as the 22nd player, the 22nd best player among players under 25. Players above him include Jalen Green, Cade Cunningham, Jalen McDaniels. Walker Kessler didn't make the list somehow. Everyone's got an opinion. So I got to ask, how educated is the fan opinion? How educated is the beat guy's opinion? How educated is Granger's opinion? There's so many biases at play. I don't think the Raptors have had a terrible offseason. I think they're paying for having a terrible trade deadline. Now, sometimes you're good, sometimes you're lucky. Something that I learned working at a hedge fund was that you have to trust your due diligence and your process. The results are not always as important as your process. What do I mean by process? How do you make decisions? What information do you use? How do you gather that information? How do you synthesize that information? A lesser general manager probably would have dangled Scottie Barnes by this point. I think a lesser general manager, in order to save face, may have caved on the Fred VanVleet demand. I think it's fair to hold this front office accountable for things that they didn't do in the past. I think, however, that criticism should stay in the past. The question then becomes, what did you want them to do when Fred VanVleet received a max contract? If I listen to ESPN, build a time machine and know that that offer was going to be there. And there's no way to know that that offer was going to be there. You know, every single contract, almost every single contract that I've ever signed has flood insurance. Force majeure is what it's called. The understanding there is that you do not control unforeseen, unpredictable events. When the Celtics drafted Len Bias in 1986, they had no way of knowing that he would be dead before he played his first NBA game. There's no way to know that. When the Portland Trailblazers drafted Greg Oden, there were some ways to know that Greg Oden would be very injury prone. To me, this is a differentiation in how do you make decisions. There's something that the Toronto media and fans seem to be ignoring, which is age curves. And I really want to say that information changes, and as information changes and data sets change, sometimes they can change in a couple of weeks, a couple of months. You should adjust. Bad organizations take a really long time to adjust. Good organizations find a way to adjust on the fly. I genuinely believe that the Raptors overestimated their roster at the trade deadline, and I blasted them for it. I didn't see a winner. I didn't see a champion. I didn't see a playoff winner. I didn't see a team that could possibly win a round in the playoffs. I didn't see that. And so I was very critical of the idea that they would push to bolster the core by getting Jakob Poeltl. I was firm that they needed to tank. After that decision was made, however, there's no point in beating a dead horse. I don't get to then go back and say, well, I'm just going to continue to harp on what you did wrong then. What I want to know is, how do you pivot once you find out that you made the wrong decision? And I'm sure that if the Raptors could do it over again, given how the season ended, they may have thought differently. Maybe they would have moved Fred. Maybe, hopefully, they would have moved Fred and Gary. Maybe they wouldn't have made a trade for Jakob Poeltl. Maybe they would have actually bottomed out. But they believed in this core. Question is, did they have a right to believe in that core? Yes, they did. They did. And I had a right to be critical of it. Both things can be true. They had a right to believe in that core because they were on pace for about 38 wins. And the talent on paper and in theory suggests that that team was massively underperforming, that they should have been a 48 to 52 win team, even in a revamped and more competitive Eastern Conference. So the question then became, was Jakob Poeltl the missing piece? It's a clunky fit. It's a calculated gamble. You didn't give away everything. Yeah, you gave away a lot. I think the thing that you gave up most was you worsened this draft pick. But beyond that is the value of Jakob Poeltl over the next 4 years, and you did re-sign him, so thank God for that. Is that value going to be more or less over the next 4 years than all the draft picks in Khem Birch? Almost definitely yes. Almost certainly. The problem with Jakob Poeltl is now you have pigeonholed yourself into okay, we can't quite bottom out. We have a starting center. He's a little too good. And now you've kind of signed him to a deal that might be a little bit rich. And you've given him a player option. You've lost Fred VanVleet. Most people in the NBA think that you're trying to build around a player who isn't worth building around in Scotty Barnes. Most Raptor fans believe that you don't have a competitive offer for Pascal Siakam on the table. And perhaps most Raptor fans also believe that you should not be maxing out Pascal Siakam, that you shouldn't be at least super maxing him out. And that is a deal that he will potentially qualify for if he makes All-NBA. It's a really messy situation, and I can fully understand why most people who look at the Toronto Raptors are genuinely very confused about what they're doing, where they're headed, and why they're doing what they're doing. What is the future of a team being led by Scotty Barnes with no draft pick? What is the future of this team if your front court is Scotty, Pascal, OG, Precious, Koloko, Jakob Poeltl? What is the outcome of that team? Certainly, it's not a championship contender. I don't think that would have changed whether Fred was here or not, but certainly that's not in the cards right now. So where are we? We're exactly where Masai Ujiri said he wouldn't be, the middle. When a decision is made, there is a calculated gamble baked into that decision. I believe that when Pascal Siakam was 24, they had a vision for the type of player he could be potentially by 27. I believe perhaps the pandemic and his own regression in certain areas has hampered that. I did a little bit of digging into Brian Colangelo and his thoughts on Chris Bosh. Rarely ever reported, rarely ever talked about when Chris Bosh's name comes up. But do you know that when Chris Bosh left to go to the Miami Heat, Brian Colangelo went on the record and said that two things. Number one, he said Chris quit on the team, that he had put his own self-interest above the team. He'd milked that injury, even though he was cleared to play. He did not choose to play because he didn't want to risk further injury, because he didn't want to risk the contract with the Miami Heat. And second, he said that regardless of what type of roster we put around this guy, we couldn't quite build something that made sense. Chris Bosh's entire career resulted in 3 playoff wins. Pascal Siakam, as the first option, has resulted in one playoff round, one, which is in the bubble. And he played terribly in that. That's 4 years. That's a 4-year sample size. Now, to those of you who say, but Rob, he picked up basketball late. A lot of athletes actually do switch sports a little bit later than you might expect. This isn't completely unheard of. Pascal Siakam was an athlete. Even prior to becoming a basketball player, he was an athlete, just like Christian Koloko was an athlete. These guys are all athletes. He wasn't some chubby kid eating Twinkies until the age of 16, and then he shifted over to basketball. And when you look at athletic performance across sports, you have to actually look at age curves. And I'm going to show you some. This channel is known for analytics, so let me show you some. Here's aging from 2010 per win shares per 48. Do you see a peak? It is 26. The peak is 26. The regression starts pretty heavily around 30. Okay? This is age distribution for all Olympians. This is including all sports from 1992 and 2020. Are you noticing a peak? Typically speaking, it's almost unheard of. And there are outliers, of course. There are players that you can pick that say, okay, they will peak at 32, they will peak at 31, fine. But it's almost unheard of for a player who relies on quick twitch athleticism or an undersized guard, which is what Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet are, to peak later than 30. So, I mean, this is per sport. Yes, equestrian is the one sport where you can be 35 and be really great at equestrian. But basketball is right there, firmly. Not quite as drastic as football, soccer, but it's there. 25. Here's box plus minus, the aging curve on box plus minus. This is from 2015, I believe. Now, let me show you Kobe Bryant. These are Kobe's peak years, 24 to 29. I assure you, whether he won championships later on, whether he remained a really good player, his box plus minus, his win shares, every analytic on the planet declined after 30 and significantly declined after 34 when he had that major injury. And you can see it. You can significantly see it. Kobe is not alone. Almost every NBA great has this trajectory. This is Kevin Garnett's peak. His last peak year was his first year with Boston when they won a championship. After that, you saw a notable dip in production and impact on winning. So, in all likelihood, the very best season of Pascal Siakam is behind him. And the very best season of Fred VanVleet is also behind him. Could they have a surprise pop next year? Absolutely. Absolutely. But the odds of them living up to the contracts that they are eligible for, or what Fred was eligible for, almost impossible. I would say it is statistically highly improbable, if not borderline impossible. So, if you are going to give the Raptors an F grade for their offseason, my only question is, what would you have had them do? Other than build a DeLorean time machine and go back and anticipate that Ime Udoka was going to shift the organizational focus away from James Harden. You didn't know Ime was going to get that job. I mean, last I checked, the Raptors were expecting Ime to take the Raptors job. So, in a weird way, this was completely a black swan incident. Fred VanVleet getting, I mean, if you had bet on this, if Vegas had given you odds at the trade deadline, what are the odds that a guy who cannot get Grayson Allen and a first-round pick next year is going to get a max contract from an NBA team, not China, not EuroLeague, an actual NBA team? What are the odds of a max contract, $43 million? I think you could have probably taken a 400 to 1 odds on that and probably kissed that money goodbye. If you took that bet, you are not smart, you are a clairvoyant. Because it's not something that you could have anticipated, just like you could not have anticipated Len Bias dying. You do not judge the Celtics for Len Bias dying any more than you judge the Raptors for Fred VanVleet signing with the Houston Rockets for a max contract. I think those two outcomes are almost equally improbable. And so the question then becomes, then what is there to judge this offseason? What have the Raptors done so poorly to warrant such criticism? What has Masai Ujiri done so poorly to warrant such criticism? Was the deal for Jakob Poeltl a little rich? Yeah, it's a little rich. I would have preferred 16 to 18 million, but if they front load the deal, it's not that bad. Would I have preferred no player option? Sure. But if they front load the deal, I don't care because he's not picking it up anyway. Would I have preferred that they traded Pascal Siakam at the deadline? I mean, maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know. But I tell you, I'm very happy with their draft pick. And I'm fairly satisfied with their free agent signing so far. And I really like their coaching hire. So what is the F grade for? The F grade is for not being able to see the future. And apparently Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster should be able to see the future. They should have been able to see that Fred VanVleet was going to chase the money. Honestly, I think anyone could have told you that he was going to chase the money. I just don't think that you or anyone on this planet could have anticipated that this type of money was going to be available for him. I think the Raptors made a calculated gamble on Fred and Pascal at the ages of 24 that they could morph into something more as leaders than they've become. And now that it is time to pay up for what they have done, I think there is a disparity between the two sides and what they think they have done and what they think they are worth. Now, it is not lost on me that a lot of people, I endured those Twitter spaces for a reason. I wanted to understand what fans think. I do these call-in shows for a reason. I want to understand where y'all are at. Like, where's your head at? What are you thinking? Where are you getting your information from? I listen to other YouTubers. I even read the Toronto Star. Surprise. I'll listen to Will Lou's show. All the narrative is, OG can't dribble. Gary's kind of a bum. Precious is a bum. Koloko's a bum. Otto's a bum. Scotty regressed last year. So really, it's just Fred and Pascal, right? Those are the guys. Those are the best guys on your team. Those are your two best players by a landslide. No one else comes close. It's impossible to replace either of them. And God forbid if you lose both of them in a season where you don't even have your top 5 pick. Well, you have a top 5 pick, but you don't have your first round. You don't have control of your first round pick. And it's very hard to imagine if you get anything back for Siakam that you'd be bad enough to bottom out. Well, now you're just screwed. You're absolutely screwed, right? And if we take these rumors that the Raptors have, to some extent, not offered Pascal Siakam an extension, and that they have decided that they are going to attempt to shop him, then there's, of course, some feeling of, wait, we already lost the one good player. Do we want to lose the other good player too? How bad are we going to be? I bring it back to Chris Bosh. You lost an all-star, multiple-time all-star. You lost by far your best player. By far. He went on to win 2 championships. He went to 4 straight finals as a de facto third option. And then he got the blood clots and, that was curtains on his career. He became a Hall of Famer, man. And you got a first round pick back for him. And that was largely due to a sign and trade, due to Brian Colangelo pushing on tampering. But you basically got nothing back for Chris Bosh, right? And that's tough. But was it that tough? Think about it. Was it really that tough? Did it not lay the groundwork for DeMar and Kyle to ascend? Did it not give you an opportunity to see what you had or didn't have in Andrea Bargnani? In the end, did you not eventually set in motion a 10-year plan that eventually won you a championship the second he left? You won a championship the decade, literally on the dot decade after he left. And not to mention, from 2013 onward, which is just 3-4 years after he left, you were one of the most successful franchises in the NBA. That's the Masai Ujiri effect. Now, look, I am not one of those content creators who is afraid, even though I am definitely going to be going for a media pass at some point, and I've been told a couple times, hey man, don't be too critical of management, don't be too critical of the PR team. I wouldn't care if they do something like that's egregious or stupid. I will fully do a 24-hour live roasting them. I don't care. But I don't disagree with what they're doing. I really don't. I think that the logic has been sound. I think the pivot is hard. I think that taking this initial lashing in the media of looking like you don't know what you're doing, hiring an unproven head coach. You didn't hire Bud. You didn't hire Monty. You didn't hire Ime. You didn't hire somebody who got you the pop or the pizzazz or the, oh my God, look who they replaced Nick Nurse with. They replaced him with a guy who's been to the finals, won a championship. You didn't do that. You instead went for a very unconventional, very unpopular choice, who became a popular choice because he won people over with charisma and charm. But let's be honest, if they had hired Coach Bud, I think a lot of people would probably feel like, oof, we got a championship head coach to replace a championship head coach. No, they went the other way. Are their assistants full of ex-NBA coaches? No, it's a really young group. Did they draft the popular pick? I mean, Grady Dick was fairly popular among circles, but I think they could have gotten a little bit more pop if they had gone with Kobe Buffkin. They didn't. This is an organization that has always marched to the beat of their own drum. I think they take really calculated gambles. And over the last 10 years, I've really come to appreciate learning from how they make decisions. How they make decisions on people, how they make decisions on money, how they make decisions on contracts. I will tell you, if you've ever invested in real estate or in property or in a stock, you have to have a process through which you vet stocks. If you've ever invested in people, you have to have a process through which you invest in people. And once in a while, your process is going to be right, but your result is going to be wrong. You don't throw out the process. You just don't. You don't. Because once in a while, you're gonna hit a couple of losses and people are going to panic. And I think that's what's happening right now. Because I don't think that OG Anunoby or Scotty Barnes or Gary or Christian or Precious or any of these guys are as bad as people are making them out to be. And for a team that had its leadership, its head coach, its starting point guard, basically pushed this narrative all year that he was the only reason that it was holding up, to effectively say that him going, him leaving, him not coming back is the reason that the whole thing is going to fall apart, is in effect proof that what he did all year worked by dominating possessions, being an analytics darling. Yes, there is a general consensus that Dennis Schroeder cannot replace Fred VanVleet. There's also a general consensus, in my opinion, that Fred VanVleet is one of the least efficient scorers in the NBA. He is also one of, in my opinion, the worst leaders in the NBA. So There might be a little bit of addition by subtraction element to the chemistry boost here. Maybe. I think the Raptors can still surprise. I think there are certain players on this roster who are going to look a lot better. A lot better. Let us be honest. We get off-season projections wrong all the time. All the time. I did not anticipate the Detroit Pistons being this bad last year this time. They were one of my surprise pop teams. I thought they'd actually be good. I thought Cade would come back. I thought he'd be healthy. He wasn't. I thought Walker Kessler would be a bust. He wasn't. I thought Jabari Smith was going to be better than Paolo. He wasn't. We get projections wrong all the time. Even super smart people who do all the research get projections wrong all the time. So right now, my only question to you, Raptor fans, is how humble are you willing to be about how wrong you could potentially be about what's actually happening in Raptorland? Now, I'm not telling you that it is impossible that the Raptors be a 25-win team. It would be ridiculous and quite arrogant for me to say there's no chance of that happening. I'm also not going to tell you that there's no chance this is on a 50-win team, especially if they bring back Pascal Siakam. But even if they don't, I think that there is such a disconnect between the players on this roster, the talent they actually possess, and the talent they were able to show, and the reputation they have around the league. Now, this is not a bad thing for the Toronto Raptors. This is not a bad thing. You had a coach and a starting point guard who basically did not optimize his pieces. Maybe you get some of those pieces back for a little bit cheap, right? It's kind of the only benefit that I can think of having a selfish point guard is kind of makes everybody else look a lot worse than they really are. I think there's a lot of really positive surprises for this team that are coming down the pipeline. And to date, while I am not enamored or in love with the Raptors offseason so far, I certainly find no reason to criticize it. I don't think there's any reason to be suggesting that Masai Ujiri is fighting for his job. I mean, William Liu said David Thorpe is really plugged in. Yeah, he is. He knew Masai. Don't act like he talks to Masai every day or that he has a real pulse on things. I listen to this guy's True Hoop podcast every week. He says crazy things all the time. I'm one of the biggest Kenny Lofton fans on earth. He said Kenny Lofton's going to be an all-star. Yo, if he loses weight, he's going to be an all-star. Like, okay, like let's take a few things with a grain of salt. He's smart, but he's not that plugged in. He also said Scotty Barnes had work ethic issues. I honestly would love if Yahoo Sports just stopped talking to David Thorpe personally. But nevertheless, where do we go from here with the Pascal Siakam thing? Honestly, I'm willing to let it play out. It doesn't really bother me. As long as both sides are kosher and are aware that this is where we stand, this is where you stand, you don't want to get traded, we don't want to pay you supermax. I think at some point they will offer him a max, and I think maybe he will take it. And if that will be the conclusion of this offseason and he's not getting traded to Atlanta, even though he followed Trae Young and Trae Young followed him and DeAndre Hunter erased his social media, and if that happens, that's fine. But I'm fine either way. If the Raptors go the other way, I think they're going to be really fun to watch. I think they're going to be loosely competitive, and I think they might actually push for a play-in spot. Yes, they will probably surrender an 11th or 12th pick, but maybe, just maybe, some people grow, some people pop. Who knows? You might get something competitive. If Pascal comes back, look, man, I've been doing a lot of film study on the Raptors and how they played without Fred VanVleet. The Atlanta game, 139 points. Scotty Barnes, I think he hit 5 threes. The Spurs game, the pace was insane in that game. The 2 Philly games, there's so many possessions to map out. And I'm sorry, what I hear in the Twitter sphere about the player that Scotty is and what I'm watching on film, it's just not the same person. This concept that he can't break down his guy, he doesn't have any creativity off the dribble. Like, I mean, God, I'm not suggesting it's his greatest trait, but don't act like he can't dribble the basketball. Like, this is crazy to me. You know what I mean? It was a Division I point guard. Like, you're talking about him like he's a center. And I just think that there's such a, it's hard to listen to these things, to know that these people have an audience, and to wonder, like, am I taking crazy pills? Like, what am I not seeing? Like, I have looked at it from 100 different angles. I promise you, I have. Like, I should test myself constantly. I will look at this with extreme critique. Like, and I'm open to finding out that he's not a point guard. I'm open to finding out that he's just going to be a small ball center or a point forward, like people want him to be. Bro, every time I watch him play, I fully see a point guard. So I don't know. Kyle Lowry saw a point guard too. Jason Kidd sees a point guard too. Magic Johnson sees himself. So, I mean, someone's wrong here, right? Someone is fucking wrong. Fred VanVleet is either, gonna be like, it's crazy when you listen to ESPN talk about this, right? He's gonna coach up the young roster. He's gonna bring these young players up to the next level. I'm just like, bro, like, what is happening here? You know what I mean? Like it's like the season that I just lived through doesn't exist. This is like, I want to say something really controversial here, but like, this is crazy to me. You know what I mean? Dylan Brooks and Fred VanVleet are going to bring veteran leadership for your youth. Yo, bro, like, I would pay them $90 million to stay away from the team. Is that super disrespectful? Maybe. I'm not trying to turn this into a Fred slander pod, but I'm just saying, like, bro, like, what? Like, they took the money. That's it. Like, all this narrative is going to collapse real fast, because if the Rockets come out to like 5-22 start, like, Fred's immediately going to start throwing the young guys under the bus. There's not, like, there's no amount of money you can pay this dude to change who he is. Like, a leopard can change its spots. Like, what's that old quote? Anyways, let's bring on some callers, man. I've been rambling on for 36 minutes. Can't believe I made it 36 minutes. We got Mo, and then we got Robert. Am I in the Twilight Zone? Calling myself? Okay. Mo, Coach Mo, what's going on, man?
I'm good. First thing I want to say is, if we're healthy, we're winning more than 25 games. 100%.
Thank you.
If Scotty's healthy, if Siakam's healthy, or what we get for Siakam, OG, Gary, Otto, Precious, dude, we're winning 35. Easy.
35 is like, is that the basement? That's the basement.
Sorry.
What's the upside?
Because last I checked, we've had winning records when Fred and Pascal weren't playing anyway. So,
right,
you can miss me with all that. Also, who's Fred breaking down the dribble? Who's Fred beating? Last time I checked, the last game we played, I saw Fred couldn't get by Vucevic. So,
for real,
he couldn't get by Vucevic straight line drive. So you're saying don't give the ball to Barnes? I guarantee you Barnes beats Vucevic off the dribble. Even if he doesn't, he just fully extends his arm and beats him just with vertical read, just with arm length. Like this, it's upside down world. It's actually crazy. People don't watch the games.
Yeah, you're killing me, man. Yeah. No, I agree. And I completely agree. It's crazy to me, man. Like the way that people talk about some of these dudes, right? Like, it's nuts, man. Like, Jakob Poeltl is not an average center in the NBA, according to some report. I was just like, whoa, bro, average. He is significantly above average center in the NBA. He's, by my estimation, top 10, 11. You know what I mean? Like, it's a top 10, 11. So he's a top 65 to top 70 player. And if center is like the least valuable, but most valuable, kind of like a weird dichotomy, because it's like, it's obviously a very valuable skill set and a very valuable position. I don't know, man. Like, I think, shoot, like, is he a top 65 value guy in the league? For sure. And in his prime, 20 million, easy. Like, the Celtics are on the verge of paying Jaylen Brown $60 million a year. You're not telling me Jaylen Brown impacts winning 3 times more than Fred VanVleet. I'm sorry, Jakob Poeltl. So it's just, it's nuts. Like, I get it. You know, one is the sexy pick, right? He's gone to the finals. He can dribble, he can shoot, etc. And one is just a guy who sets screens and rebounds and hustles. But shit, man, like, that stuff does add up to wins, right?
The whole Masai Ujiri thing, because you're kind of like on a defending the Masai in the front office. I agree. I like Masai. I don't like him as much as I used to. But the question is, are you comparing him Like, people need to ask themselves, are you comparing Masai and the Raptors front office to other front offices or to what they used to be? Because if you're comparing Masai to what he used to be, it's a fall off. Now, if you're comparing him to the rest of the league, the majority of the league, yeah, I'd still take him over like 95% of the league. But dude, I was looking up some of the trades this guy was doing. Oh my God. Like, I wouldn't pick up his phone call. I'd be scared to pick up the phone and talk to this dude. Like,
Yeah, I get where you're coming from. Look,
he turned John Salmons, Rob, he turned John Salmons in 2014 to Lucas Nogueira and Lou Williams, the corpse of John Salmons. He turned, in 2015, he turned Grievous Vasquez into Norman Powell and a first-round pick, which ended up being OG Anunoby, right? Like, it's crazy what this guy was doing. He signed Bismack Biyombo to a minimum.
Right, but
He turned Andrea Bargnani into Jakob Poeltl.
This is the danger in what you're doing, though, right?
I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. I'm comparing him to the competition. But he fell off. Let's not get it twisted.
Hear me out on this, right?
Okay.
He did not develop OG Anunoby.
Well, he didn't.
He did not develop Jakob Poeltl. Because if I told you that he turned Andrea Bargnani into Jake Voschkel or Alex Len, you wouldn't give a shit.
He took lemons and made lemonade.
But the lemonade was not made by Masai. This is the problem with crediting someone for too much. He drafted the right players. Per my estimate, he has not stopped drafting the right players. Okay. I think something has happened to the players he's been drafting in terms of their development curve. Now, if OG Anunoby, with a very scary injury history, had come out of Indiana, come to the Raptors. Now, he was ahead of schedule. He decided to play in preseason, etc. Let's say he goes down with another ACL tear, literally on preseason, right? He misses an entire year, comes back, then he strains his Achilles, misses another half year, busts his ankle. Then it's nothing. He's nothing. So the training staff had a lot to do with his rehab. The development staff had a lot to do with the fact that he still can't dribble very well, but that he became a serviceable role player. His coaching staff had a lot to do with the fact that he started pretty much from day one. The reps that he got guarding LeBron in the playoffs, how much motivation do you think that is for a young player? Here's my question. Have you ever taken everything out of a closet in order to organize it? Do you organize that way? Do you clean that way, or am I crazy? I'm the only one who does that.
I actually do. When I clean, I take most of the things out.
Me too. If I could take this computer and take it on a house tour right now, like the way that we have just upended the entire house, like ripping apart everything and just pulling everything out into the surface, into the center, I tell you, it is overwhelming how depressing this place looks. But it's only going to look that way for about 7 days while we sort things out, throw things out. After that, it's going to be clear sailing. Sometimes this process of pivoting is really messy. You don't make sense to anybody. People don't pivot well. This is my opinion. People don't pivot well. You know, when like a politician comes out and he's supporting, one thing, and then he comes out and says, I don't support that thing anymore, people usually revolt against that guy. Usually. They call him a flip-flopper. They say he's like, we as a society do not take well to people changing their mind. This is a very strange phenomenon, but it goes beyond basketball and it goes into politics. It goes into environment. It goes into everything. We just don't like people changing their mind too drastically. And, we don't like people pivoting too much because then it makes them unreliable and we can't peg them into a corner anymore. And I think that Masai Ujiri has changed his mind about this roster. I don't think that he made a very competitive offer for Fred VanVleet. I don't think he was overly convinced about the need to bring him back. Yep. I don't think that he was seriously entertaining even putting $35 million on the table.
I don't think so either.
Right? So there's the question. When did that shift happen? Because I assure you at the deadline, there was probably a little bit more faith. Did he observe something? Did he see something? And then the consequence of that is after the deadline, you can't make any trades. Would he have traded him in April if he could have? Maybe, but he couldn't because the trade deadline was over. So it's that's where I say okay, The only way that I fail the Raptors this offseason is if they sign Fred back. That to me would have been like absolute disaster season. You've signed him to an unmovable contract.
I mean, the disaster would have been keeping Nurse and signing Fred back. That would have been
absolutely
That
that
would have been
to,
disaster.
to me, like that would be like I'm done. Like I would be so close. Like you call it out, you say this is a problem, and then you bring these guys back. No more. But this is difficult. Firing Nick Nurse is difficult from a PR perspective.
Okay,
he
yeah, I was
still
gonna say,
felt.
I don't think internally it was not difficult internally.
I don't think internally it was
I
difficult
think
either.
it was really easy. I think it's
so
how they
too.
had to execute it was the difficult part. I think they were fed up with that guy.
I think the NBA media in general pretty much like considers it a nothing burger, firing him versus not firing him. But I think most people would assume that hiring Darko to replace Nick Nurse doesn't move the needle. I think it moves the needle big time. I just think it's, I don't know, something that Nurse said that really started thinking about it yesterday. 10 years is a long time.
Yeah.
10 years is a long time. You know how long Masai Ujiri has been here? 10 years.
Yeah.
It is a long time. It's a really long time. And I think that he maybe took his hands off a little too much, took his foot off the pedal a little too much. Too much trust in the infrastructure that he had developed. Not enough attention given to the amount of brain drain that had happened. And I think when he noticed it, it was already too late. The wheels were already in motion. And apparently, according to reports, he noticed it a lot. He yelled at people. He called out people. He basically told them, like, fucking stop being selfish or I'm going to trade you. Like, he fought for this. I like hearing that. Do you know how many teams out there are selfish and their general managers don't care?
Dude.
Like, I love it. I love that he came out and said we were selfish, that we stat padded, and that it was hard to watch this team. I love that. I love that he did that because to those who sat in this fan base and also on the team, it was a vote of confidence that we are not all crazy. You know what I mean? You know how much that legitimized it?
We had our three senior guys, and when we talked before, I call it the Holy Trinity, who would wear their own merch. Pascal would wear his PS, Fred would wear his FVV, and Nick Nurse was wearing NN. And these guys were high on their own supply. These guys' heads were in the clouds. You couldn't tell them nothing, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
And the season just burned to the ground.
Yeah.
And thank God 2 of them are gone. So, and
I mean, I think Pascal
was the worst. Pascal was like, he was almost lumped in, and at the end, I didn't even want to lump him in with them. So, it's like I have nothing. If we keep Pascal, I'm cool.
I'm cool too. I've watched a lot of film of him and Scotty and OG and Jakob working together. That front court, it can work. Scotty can play point. He totally can. I think a lot of people
Fred
are very
can play point. Scotty can play point.
Yeah, totally different players, and I think like his handle has gotten a lot better this offseason from what I've seen, and the shooting it'll only disrupt it even more. He's got like really long strides, right? So like the way people talk about him, like it's like I have to like double check sometimes. You know what I mean? Like when people are talking about him, like, oh, he can't dribble the ball, he has no handle, and I'm just like, bro, like
I was watching highlights, and the narrative on him makes you forget. Like you have to go back and watch, and you're like, holy, he's okay.
Like
I had to remind myself. I had to remind myself of what he's capable of.
Like he's a really good player.
Really
just
good.
like it's insane to me because like I mean I understand from the outside looking in. Like I had a meeting with a really big NBA company, right? And maybe I shouldn't talk about this, but like I've had a couple of beers, so like truth serum out. And we were just talking about Scotty, and they're based in LA, or I think they're based in LA. So it's just like the perception that they have of him out there is, why are you devoting your channel to basically a role player? Do you know what I mean? Like they couldn't understand why he was on our channel art. Like they couldn't even wrap their head around like the fact that he's a really good player. And I'm just like, whoa, what have you done for me lately, bro? Like this guy wins Rookie of the Year.
Mm-hmm.
He's second in his entire draft class, which is supposed to be a really great draft class in terms of win shares. He's impacted winning in so many ways. There's like 18 different statistical categories in which he did get better last year, despite, you know, significant downgrades in certain other categories. And it's just like, wow, like, am I seeing something that isn't there? Or are these people just really dumb? And I've come to the conclusion after 2 months of questioning this that these people are just really dumb.
But also,
and that's as bluntly as I'm going to put it.
I mean, but the power of media is like the way Will Liu and other Toronto media were pushing for Scotty for Rookie of the Year after like post All-Star break when Fred got hurt, and it was the Pascal Scotty show, right? And Pascal did his campaigning for on the court for All NBA, and Scotty was doing. It's like they were pro Scotty, and it helped, and he won Rookie of the Year. And then this year they were anti Scotty, so that helped. It's like they're so powerful, but hopefully with the new coach, it doesn't matter what they say. The production, they'll just have to keep silent and wait in the dark for, you know, their
Who's
opportunity.
powerful? The media?
Yes, major. These idiots that don't know anything about anything, yeah,
they influence the casuals, man. But I think the
you don't think they helped him win Rookie of the Year? You don't think they played a part?
I'm sure they did. I mean, yeah. I mean, we could all say, you know, certain things played a part. The Raptors winning record played a part. The Raptors late season surge played a part. Toronto's a pretty large media market. That played a part. A lot of emails were written on his behalf. That played a part. He's a very likable guy. That played a part. You know, it made a good story.
Why didn't any of those things besides the media play a part this year? Why did it ruin his stock so much this year?
Well, I think you know, expectations doom reality in so many ways, right? Like you have an expectation with the hype of a Rookie of the Year, et cetera. In a lot of ways, you know, I like to look at young players in 2-year chunks, right? I look at year 1 and 2 in one chunk, year 3 and 4 in another chunk, right? This linear growth thing doesn't happen for most players. Even like really great players, sometimes you'll see year 2, year 3, there's a plateau, and then year 4, there's a jump, or year 1, year 2, there's a plateau, and then year 3, there's a jump. Like the jumps are unexpected, but prior to 25, they can happen whenever, which means that Scotty can come out next year, have another, you know, 1.5 to 2 box plus minus type of season where he's not an all-star, and then the next year he's like 7. It can happen. Like the trajectory of growth, like when people compare a 21-year-old to a 27-year-old or 28-year-old or 29-year-old, is completely different. Because the brain is different at that age, the body is different regardless. And I think one of Scotty's biggest curses is he's physically huge. Like he's physically like a grown man, right? And I think that was somewhat of a Dwight Howard effect as well. You know, people didn't give Dwight the, oh, he's 18. Oh, he's 19, because he looked like 28.
Yeah.
And this can weigh very heavily when talking about Fred VanVleet and Scotty Barnes, right? Because in a weird way, we compare Scotty and Fred or Scotty and Pascal because when we see them, it's very difficult to comprehend that there's an 8-year gap between these players. It's very difficult. Like it's almost impossible because he looks physically like bigger than them.
And he has a higher IQ.
And he has a higher IQ and, you know, whatever. But I mean, like, but I mean, like, just like sometimes, and, you know, Brian says it a lot. It's like, you just have to remember he's 21 years old. Like he's 21 years old. Like who knew everything at 21, who had everything figured out at 21, you know? And, even the recent talk about Grady, you know, like because he does a Donald Duck impression, you know, he's not taking basketball seriously enough. And just the context of the talk, you know, sometimes you pick up on little things like William Liu saying like, oh, you know, I was surprised to know that he's actually like all business, and a lot of questions were being asked by our
Listen,
media
listen,
about like,
Hayden,
is he a joker? And it's just like, bro, like someone having a sense of humor, like, bro, like
I know.
if you watch Chris Rock, like you're not serious about basketball. Like if you do Twitch, you have a PS5, you're not serious about basketball. Like
Austin Reeves was on All the Smoke with
Yeah.
Steven Jackson and Matt Barnes, and he was talking about LeBron James. He's like, LeBron James he's just a big kid. He just joking around, laughing all the time, having a great time. And that dude's resume is like top 2, top 3. This idea, like it's so crazy how people say these things. It's like, do you not live in real life?
Oh, Michael Jordan.
Are you not
look at all
people?
look at all the extracurriculars in Michael Jordan's career. Like seriously, look at it. Golf, gambling, baseball. Like, are you kidding? Like well-rounded people make better basketball players. Completely 1000% believe this to be true. My neuroscience video with Catherine just cemented it for me completely. I've always suspected this to be true, but I really believe it to be true now. The fact that he has interests like his dog, like his camps, like video games, like baseball, whatever his interests are, like attending hockey games, like chilling with his friends. I'm happy that he's a well-rounded person. I don't want basketball to become his be-all, end-all, because then he's going to have anxiety attacks every single time he ends up in the playoffs. I'm happy that he took the time to make a video, celebrating giving his mom a car. Like, that's an amazing thing to be able to do for somebody. You know what I mean? Like, people are like, I don't know, being in this space, I've focused on other people in this space more than I ever have before. Like when I was just a Raptor fan and I wasn't doing any of the writing stuff, I maybe listened to one of these podcasts every single week. Now I listen to all of them. I feel like I need to. And it's mind-numbing to know how misinformed some of these takes are, not even from a basketball perspective, just from a psychological perspective. It's so weird to hear some of these ideas not only being presented but being widely adopted. Is bizarro world.
Like Fred's going to lead that team anywhere. That I'm excited just to watch that team.
I hope they do well.
I'm just interested to see how it works. I just want to see how it works.
I hope they do well.
The one good thing about Scotty's season last year was it was an up and down year, but I feel like there was a lot of mental growth in 1 year. Like
absolutely. One of the central goals of this channel, and I'm sure I've mentioned this before,
a lot of adversity in 1 year, I think is really good for him for his future.
Exactly.
Right. If you can make it through this, the world
want failure.
You
want failure early. You
Yes.
want it. And if you're not gonna, the worst thing you want is Patrick Williams, right? Where, God, what is it? There's a parable. I was thinking about it yesterday about the frog. When you throw a frog into boiling water, it jumps out, right? But you turn it up slowly, it'll roast to death. So you need like failure to jolt you. You don't want this gradual decline into, oh, he's going to be a role player. You just don't want that. You don't want that to become the expectation, because that has become the expectation for a lot of top 5 players, like top 5 picks, like Sheldon Williams, Alex Len. Like no one, like when people say, oh, he's a top 5 pick, go and look at all the top 5 picks. How many of them are actually superstars? Like very few. DeAndre Ayton was a number 1 overall pick. DeAndre Hunter was a top 5 pick, right? Josh Jackson, top 5 pick. Marvin Bagley, top 2 pick. Like, my God, like how many players not only didn't become superstars, not even average NBA players.
Adam Morrison,
Andrea Bargnani. Like, there's so many. It's all over. So this idea that like he's somehow underperformed because, oh my God, he had a $5 plus minus season, 5 win share season, and he regressed in this area and that area. Like, it's a little bit strange to me, but I'm looking forward to seeing him.
I'm so excited with
me too.
What the coach is saying, he's going to coming in healthy, knock on wood. I'm excited, man.
Anyways, Mo, thanks a lot for calling in, man.
You too. Take it
Have
easy.
a good one. Peace. All right, let's bring on Charles. Charles, what's going on, man?
Hey Rob, thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of what you do, man.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
So going on Masai's, I guess his grade for the offseason. I mean, I don't necessarily like what he's done, but I think it's overblown. I think your takes are legit,
What
and
do you not
even
like?
I mean, the signings are meh. They're not great. It's like the best
Fair.
of a poo-poo platter, basically. But you gotta fill in roster spots. We could have done
Who would you
worse.
rather have had? If it was not Dennis Schroeder, I'm assuming Gabe Vincent. Like who would you have targeted? I'm just curious. Like with the mid level and the biennial, like who would you have targeted?
So Gabe Vincent would have filled in a better hole shooting wise. I don't necessarily think he's a better player than Dennis Schroeder,
Okay.
but in terms of a fit, I think the fit, it's a fine line between choosing the better player and choosing the
He's a
better
little bit
fit.
younger too. He's a little bit
Yeah,
younger as well,
uh,
but he is a much worse defender.
he is absolutely. But I mean, our defense is just so good. You can hide that, and the
If
thing is,
Scotty's playing point, you have some serious point of attack holes, right? Fred was very good at navigating screens, and prior to last year, he was really good at point of attack defense. Now, last year, his point of attack defense regressed, and Gabe Vincent is significantly worse than regressed Fred VanVleet in
that's
that
true.
regard.
That's
So
true.
Dennis Schroeder being able to pressure the ball, I think adds something. Now, there's a couple of things that he's done that have given me a little bit of a pause. And this is just 1 week. This is just 1 week of Dennis Schroeder quotes, and I'm just like, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. But
Oh, it's
I
crazy.
get the idea. I at least understand the idea. Yeah, it's a little rich for my blood, but I think a lot of people are maybe looking at it as like, oh, he was on a minimum contract last year. What has he done to deserve like a mid-level exception? He should
Oh,
have
I
never been on a mid-level. Sorry, he should have never been on a minimum.
no, I agree. I agree. I guess the craziness is him talking off cuff. And I like Schroeder for who he is, but he needs to also remember who he is in terms of what he's coming into as well.
Right.
And going back to the Gabe Vincent thing, like as a singular piece, absolutely Schroeder all day. But like look at the rest of our personnel. And again, you make a good point with the defense there, but I mean, our serious lack of shooting needs to be filled somehow, and we all already doubled down with Pirtle in our front court, taking away like
Right.
just the spacing in that front court. And again, you have Scotty plays point guard. That kind of moves things, shifts things in a different way, where you can kind of put a shooter in the front court. Like there's more front court minutes for shooters,
Players
but
shot better on Scotty passes than Fred passes last year. So by osmosis, just addition by subtraction, if they're getting those passes from Scotty, they're going to be more on time, more on target, delivered in a more consistent way.
who
I
shot
think
better? Sorry.
everyone,
Okay.
on average, players shot better from three from the field on Scotty passes. This was true up until February when I did the checks. So I don't know if that changed after February, but when I last did the dig into this, yes, players were shooting pretty terribly on Fred passes. And that's largely because Fred doesn't do a lot to move the defense
Yeah.
before he passes, right?
Yep.
So obviously, if you have a player like a Gary Trent Jr. does a very, very good job. He's not a very frequent passer. He's not a very creative passer. He's not a very gifted passer, but he's a very effective passer. Why? Because every single time he has the ball, defenses shift because they know that he's going to try to score. So when he eventually does pass, it's a very big surprise. So yeah, it's a little bit different for Scotty. Obviously, people are playing him to pass. So his scoring game taking another notch up will actually make him an even more effective passer. That's the crazy part. We haven't even seen like 10% of Scotty right now. But I think like him being there, Otto potentially coming back, Grady Dick probably getting 15 to 20 minutes. I think you'll fix the 3-point shooting by committee.
Oh, I agree. Like, but these are all secondary pieces. These are all bench pieces at best.
Sure.
And rotation, like
But if Otto
Otto.
plays 25 minutes, or sorry, let's say Otto plays 20 minutes, and let's say Grady plays 15 minutes, that's now 35 minutes, right? If Precious Achua, who was absolutely abysmal from three after a pretty promising, second year where he
Yeah.
shot 39% for 3 months. If these guys, like if every player on your roster, not named Grady and Otto,
But this
can
is a
just
best
shoot
case scenario,
one.
Rob. This is a best case scenario, and you can't count on that, right? I mean, I'm as hopeful as the next guy that Porter Jr. is going to stay healthy, that Grady Dick's going to break through and get solid rotational minutes,
Right.
and Precious somehow brings back what he showed in bits and spurts. But if I was a betting man, I wouldn't bet on any three of them. And then what are you left with in terms of who you can count on to fit into the rotation and provide shooting? Not a whole lot there. And I guess that's going back to things like, having Schroeder as an individual talent better than someone like a Gabe Vincent, or even like a D'Angelo Russell. But for the fit, it would have been much better to choose one of those guys, even and you can say that Russell's a better player than Schroeder. He probably is to a degree, but I don't think it's a big degree. But he would have definitely been a better fit for sure, and I would have paid the premium to have that on this team. And I'm just gonna.
The Raptors were a 48 win team in 21-22, right?
Yeah. No, for sure.
They,
Yeah.
They were still bottom 10 in 3-point shooting that year. They shot 34.5%. Now, last year, they bottomed out to bottom 3. They were the 28th team in 3-point shooting. So that 34.5% went to 33.5%. And the only teams worse were Charlotte and, ironically, Houston. Now, here's the kicker. You said if you're a betting man, I will bet you that the Raptors finish top 20 in 3-point shooting. They haven't finished top 20 in the last 2 years. I'm telling you, they're going to finish top 20 in 3-point shooting this year.
I could see that happening. And I could say that that's in the realm of happening. Like, I wouldn't bet against those odds.
So fair enough. So what else I'm saying, like when you go from 27th to 19th and you retain even 95% of what you're doing defensively, granted you have a full year now of Jakob Poeltl, you have hopefully a more movement-oriented offense, which will provide a few more easy looks at the rim.
Is it fair to say that year we won 48 wins? That was a year where we kind of caught lightning in a bottle, best case scenario, all in all. And in all reality,
how can we say best case scenario? You had a slew of health injury, health issues with Fred VanVleet towards the second half of the season. You had Fred VanVleet, a very inefficient but hot, streaky shooter. I mean, if anything, I could make a case that his
Fred was
shooting,
a legit all-star leading up to the all-star break that year. I would say what you will about Fred, like
it's not legit. I'll tell you why I don't think it's legit. Because the Raptors had a unique situation where they had a COVID, protocols and restrictions, etc. So a lot of teams were not really sending their best players across the border.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you look at the teams and the strength of schedule, and this is something that I look at extensively, specifically when I'm scouting college prospects. Like, this is one reason that I was lower on Brandon Miller than most people, because I noticed how much he struggled against top 50 teams and how much he beasted against teams that were not top 50 teams. So to me, the question then becomes, who are you against the best? Like, that's all I care about, honestly. I mean, that's 95% of what I care about, because that's what scales. That's what scales to playoff performance. That's what scales to championships. If Kawhi Leonard scored 20 points per game against playoff teams and 38 points per game against lottery teams, he wouldn't be Kawhi Leonard. He's the exact opposite. So to me, there's a lot of different ways that we manufacture all-stars, in my opinion. The leading scorer on a fairly decent team often gets a look. Fred VanVleet was one of the last players selected to the All-Star team. He was a borderline, barely made it. Now, it's on his resume forever. He's going to be able to say he made it. But you know what? So does Theo Ratliff. So does Jamal McGlure. So does Antonio Davis. There's a lot of people who've made it because they were the best player, the best healthy player on a good team. But they weren't the only reason that team was good. Antonio Davis never was an all-star.
You're absolutely right. But was it fair to say that stretch of period was the best basketball Fred's ever played? and that
It's
contributed
just
to
it's
the
just
48 win team.
unsustainable. It's
It sure is,
unsustainable
absolutely.
because
And this,
the level of competition being
I
that bad is impossible.
but I guess
You know what I mean?
I guess that's kind of my point, Rob, is that 48 win team is a bit of a mirage, and
Well,
that's
think about it this way: the Fred part of the season, which is the part that Fred did well, which of course counts towards his end of season stats, his box minus, etc. That part was the softer part of the schedule. Okay,
sure.
The harder part of the schedule is when Fred VanVleet was injured and shot abysmally, and the Raptors won a lot of those games.
Yeah, but
you know what I mean?
Okay,
Like
yeah,
he was missing a ton of those games.
Good point.
I'm just
Absolutely.
saying, like, I'm surprised that people haven't noticed this yet, but he doesn't impact like he is like, this channel is very much devoted to analytics. Fred VanVleet has made me question my entire perspective on analytics. Like completely. It makes me like every day I look at my stats degree and I just want to spit on it because it behooves me how there's always going to be one or two players that stats don't properly capture, either for better or for worse. Either they're overrepresented or they're massively underrepresented, and those are outliers. Fred, to me, is an outlier. He does not impact winning in a way that I feel like a player who has a 3, 4, 5 box plus minus. Like that, it's just crazy to me. When I watch him play, like most players, when I watch them play, I'm like, yeah, I totally get 5 EPM. I totally get, like top win share getter. Nikola
I
Jokic.
agree.
You don't need analytics to tell you Nikola Jokic is great. You watch him for
100%
one
agree.
quarter.
And just to clarify, I'm not a Fred VanVleet fan. Like, I'm happy that he signed elsewhere. I mean, I wish him the best. But I'm happy he's gone. But
Yeah,
what
me
I'm
too.
saying is that 48 win team, that is kind of an outlier in itself too, right? I mean, I don't think
That's fair. That's fair.
and
Precious Achiuwa shooting 39%. The Raptors beasting on offensive rebounds.
That's why I don't trust the secondary pieces on this team to shoot well enough to fill in those gaps.
The roster is better today than it was back then, man. You had a rookie, Scotty Barnes. You had a backup point guard who was also a rookie in Delano Banton. Like now you have Dennis Schroeder. You didn't have him. You have Gary Trent Jr., who's 2 years older. You have OG Anunoby, who's a significantly better player, in my opinion. You have Jakob Poeltl. You didn't have him back then. You have Otto Porter. I mean, it's a completely different roster. The problem is, it's like every player who's left was, in my opinion, underrated. And every player who's left as in who's gone or is about to leave or is rumored to be leaving, in my opinion, is massively overrated. So, when you see a 41-win team, the stats, the analytics, the eye test, the narratives all assign wins to various players. Some people think Pascal's worth 10 wins. I don't. Some people think Fred's worth 8 wins. I don't. So at the end of the day, when we start projecting that the Raptors next year could win 20 games if Fred and Pascal leave, that to me is saying that you believe that these people and Nick Nurse accounted for fucking 21 wins. They did not.
Yeah,
not
no,
even
it's
close.
crazy.
So that's where I think the perspective lies. And one of your winningest players, granted he may not be healthy and he may not stay healthy, but Otto Porter, per minute impact on winning is insane. Jakob Poeltl is another per minute impact guy. So really, it's just about finding the pieces.
Poeltl I can count on. Porter I can't. And I as much as I like
because he
Poeltl,
played 61. He played 61 games the year prior, right? So
prior
I mean,
to
like,
what? Not recently though. That must because he
that's
was
Golden State. Like he played 60 games for Golden State, and he was healthy throughout the playoffs, man. Like he started 3 games for them in the playoffs. Like he had a 73
But is that you're an outlier compared to? So I know like outside of his early years in the league, he's been relative to, like, I would be surprised if the average games played outside of maybe the first 5 were north of 60. I would guess they would average like
37, 74, 75, 80, 77, 56. At age 25, this is where the injuries really started to take over. I would say prior to that, his average was probably around 68,
which is what I thought,
which is
yeah,
normal.
Yeah.
So, and also like I can't even verify based on 8 minutes per game if that was due to injuries. I can't remember why he played 37 games in year one, but I do remember Washington was relatively competitive. Let's see. So Chicago is where the injuries really started to happen. So it's 15
So the recent
games.
trend here suggests that you can't count on him.
I
would.
mean, yeah, fair enough. But I mean, it's not a long trend. Okay. Like Chicago is 2019, 2020 was his first full season in Chicago. Okay. So prior to that, he had 37, 74, 75, 80, 77. And then his total for year 26 was what the hell? Year 25 was 56, and then 26. So 2019,
Hey man,
2020 is
I
where
hope
the
I'm
injuries
wrong.
really started.
I hope I'm wrong. Like when they signed Porter Jr., I was telling my buddies, this guy is the best free agent signing in Raptors history, which is kind of sad, but also how much like I love like a healthy Otto Porter Jr. in this rotation. So I
Right.
really do hope I'm wrong.
I mean, just to put this into perspective, like his injury, like serious injury concerns started the year before the pandemic. So this isn't like a 10-year track record. I understand why it's like, okay, like this is not like a player who's been super healthy the last 4 years. But in fairness, like beggars can't be choosers. There's no way in hell you get a healthy Otto Porter for $6 million a year.
Oh, yeah,
Impossible. You get him for $25 million a year. So that is going to be measured into the impact. And I'm just looking at the straight money ball. Okay. I'm buying wins. That's all I care about.
Yep.
So if Otto Porter plays 35 games for me and plays 15 minutes a night for me, he has more than made up his $6 million.
From a money ball standpoint, you're absolutely like, I take
100%.
that risk. I would take that risk. The
What
only
other
thing
choice
is,
do you have?
yeah, but the
Trading?
thing is, there's a difference between taking the risk and thinking that risk to reward is worth it and counting on the player. And I guess that's like, maybe I should count on him more, when you lay out the injuries and the recent history compared to the overall history of this
Well,
health
you're
over
not
his career.
sunk. You're
But
not sunk if he misses time. Like
no,
you
but
have
this is still a
depth.
roster spot. This is a guy that you're planning to fill in minutes, or hopefully plan to fill in minutes to address the shooting on this roster. And if you can't count on that, and where are you going to turn to now?
Well, this is where I say the process must be perfected or examined more so than the results. Now, you're taking a calculated gamble that he will be healthier than an average player, which is probably not solid in terms of a bet, right? The odds of that are low. Okay, that's fine. But here's the upside. How many players do you know at $6 million where if everything breaks right in a not in
fantastic
a
value.
historic, oh my god, he developed something that we didn't know he had. Just if he stays healthy, if he has a good bill of health, that he could close out games for you in the finals.
I guess what I'm trying to say is we don't have a contingency plan. We're betting on this horse, but when it pays off,
We
great
totally
value.
have a contingency plan, man.
What is our plan?
I mean, you have Thaddeus Young, you have Christian Colo. Well,
Like,
this is the recency bias, right, Charles? Like you're gonna talk about Thaddeus Young like he's a bum, right? He's too old.
I don't think he's a bum. I think that
he
outside
started
of
games that you won last year, right? Like he
no,
started games.
yeah, but I guess he doesn't fill in the shooting hole either. I mean, he's still a good contributor. Now you took a look at our major rotational pieces.
Do you play 2K? I'm just curious.
I don't know.
You don't?
No.
It's like, I'm just wondering where this 3-point shooting is the only way to play basketball came about.
It's not the only way to play basketball. I think it's a large part of winning basketball in today's NBA. And I think that we pigeonholed our pieces. And I will say this, like, I don't give Masai any flack for 99% of the flack he's getting right now today in the media. The one thing I will give him flack for, and it's probably the only thing, is the Pirtle trade. I think it was a horrible move for a couple of big reasons.
5 months ago, man. 5 months ago.
No,
We can't keep dancing around that. It
but
didn't
the
work
thing is,
out. It's a
the
calculated gamble.
ramifications, how calculated. First of all, I have questions to see how calculated it really was.
That's fair.
And second of all, we're still dealing with the ramifications of that in our personnel today. So even though it was done 5 months ago, we still had to work with the situation where we're at. A lot of the talk with trading Pascal, I think, has a lot to do with our personnel right now and our projected front court of Pascal, Hurdle, and potentially Scotty.
That Pirtle is 2 years younger than Pascal.
No, I agree. I know that. It's not even
So
about
in a lot of ways, he actually fits in better on the timeline trajectory than Pascal does.
I agree. And the thing is that, okay, we know that Pirtle and Scotty can work. We even know that Pascal and Scotty can work. We've seen it in
it's
Scotty's
just a
rookie year.
threesome. It's the three of them together.
So now we're
awkward.
pigeonholed in this kind of a mess, and that's on Masai. And the risk wasn't worth it. Everyone knew that year was not solid. Like Masai even knew. Like you said with the previous caller, he called out people.
I don't think he knew. I think he made a calculated gamble and a calculated estimate based on the upside of the roster. And
do you think the calculation he used was valid though? Like it's just it seemed
look,
like
man,
a really.
I think there's a
stretch.
lot. I think there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff, chemistry stuff that played a part into why the Raptors fell apart and eventually imploded. You should not have expected the Raptors to lose against Chicago. You should not have expected the Raptors to lose against Miami. You should not have expected. Yeah, now it's crazy to say that because Miami made it all the way to the finals. But I honestly, like, if they had, I'm telling you, like, I stand firm on my take. If they had faced Milwaukee in the first round, I would have given them 2 wins. I think they would have stolen 2 wins from Milwaukee.
Okay.
This is a better team
I can
than people
see
give
that.
it credit for.
Yeah, no,
and look, like at the end of the day, like you have these guys, and right or wrong,
was the juice worth the squeeze? So potentially matching up against Milwaukee and losing in the first round.
There's one part of that trade that goes a little bit underrated, which is that they top 6 protected that pick, which means they almost guaranteed themselves having to convey it. If they are as firm as I am that draft is absolute horseshit, right? Then the draft pick doesn't mean a lot. Kem Birch is negative value. You would have to have moved off a second round pick just to get rid of Kem Birch. So what was the deal actually? The deal was Jakob Poeltl, not for Kem Birch in a second and a first and a second. It was Jakob Poeltl for a top 6 protected 2024 first, which you probably estimated at the time was going to be a 20th pick. Now, could it be a 12th pick? Sure. But that is the calculation gone amok, right? But it doesn't mean that the calculation is not valid. It just means it's incorrect. Does that make sense? Like I have a reasonable expectation that I will go to the elevator and I will click the button and it will come. And it will come within 3 minutes because I've lived in this building for 10 years and that generally is what happens. There's also a very strange and rare possibility that I will wait 12 to 15 minutes for an elevator. It's possible, right?
What's the reasonable expectation with the outcome of that move here with the Raptors and that?
I think it went about as poorly as it possibly could have. Fred VanVleet leaves. Gary Trent, picks up his option, which actually didn't work.
I think that was
too poorly.
I think that's
poorly
fantastic.
For you. You get bounced in the play-in in humiliating fashion. You don't have the success that you wanted. But I mean, look, if you want proof that lineup did work, I mean, they were the highest net rating lineup in the league following that trade, right? They won every minute that they played together handily.
But it didn't. Okay,
Jakob Poeltl is a player that impacts.
He's a winning player.
In a significant way.
Player. Absolutely.
And so the idea of being able to look, at the end of the day, the only distinction here, and let's just be real, if Scotty takes the jump that I think he can take this year, this whole thing works. If he doesn't, it doesn't.
Yeah.
If Scotty comes back and he's 15 to 18 points per game, this will not work. Regardless of what Grady does, Jakob does, Pascal does, it doesn't matter. But if he becomes a 24 point per game guy right away at age 22, and he starts taking that and he starts playing with that and he starts going further with that, then every roster move that they've made will make complete and positive sense to you. At the end of the day, these early reps in the playoffs for young players that you definitely think have that superstar upside and projection are very valuable. So I can understand why they would want to give Fred and Pascal a final chance, because it's a human relationship and you've built this human relationship and you want a championship together. And I understand that
Hire
fan
fired,
psychology. No, I understand fan psychology. Look, I was not for it because I don't give a shit about these two guys beyond basketball. Like, I'm not like their friend. I'm not their
But isn't
brother.
that
I
a
don't care.
level of negligence as the executive and Masai's part? Yes, I understand. I understand, and I love Masai. I think he's great. He's fantastic. I don't want to see him fired. I don't want to see him move on. But isn't that a level of negligence not to be able to separate yourself and do what's best for the franchise? And to see that, and Masai knew more. Like, he even, like you said, he came out and talked about the selfishness. And
Look,
this,
man,
and I understand this is in hindsight of Nick Nurse just going AWOL and quitting on the team, publicly. After the trade was done, I'm sure that didn't do wonders for the locker room either. But Masai knew what was up. We all, everyone looking at the product knew without anyone actually saying. But he actually had insight into the locker room. He called people out. He said this after the fact, but he still made the move. He still made the move for Pearl, even knowing all this, and that's not a move that you would
did
take.
Pirtle help or did Pirtle hurt?
I think. I mean, it depends on what you're looking at.
Forget the draft pick for a second.
Sure, yeah. On the court last year, he helped. He obviously helped. Absolutely. Now, you look at what's happening this year and the ramifications of that move, how our personnel is pigeonholed now, how we're less flexible in the front court, how, we're juggling this Siakam, will we, won't we, where if we didn't have Pirtle, I think that's just an easy move to resign. And I don't have an issue with resigning Siakam. I had a huge issue with resigning Fred, but not Siakam. I still think that he's a great asset to have. I don't think he's a selfish player. I don't believe that he should be lumped in with Fred whatsoever just because they're considered the old guard. Like, I think that Siakam can play well with Scotty. He can play well with Pirtle. It's just in the situation now, all three, and I don't think all three of them can play well with each other, with the rest of this personnel on this roster. And that's what Masai did. He, for all the talk of flexibility, he made a very inflexible point with our personnel that now he's forced to address. And he's got to address it. I was fine with kind of playing middle of the road. And, I don't think you should make a move for the sake of making a move, and all the heat that's coming on him is unwarranted with that. But the point is, at the end of the day, we can't go into the season without, number one, addressing our shooting with our solid.
I think we have addressed our shooting. I think our shooting will be better. If you want to make a bet on top 20,
I could see that.
I'll make you a
I just
friendly
don't think.
wager.
No, I can see that. I can't.
If you've ascended to the top 20 in shooting, what was your expectation? Are you upset that they're not going to be top 10? I mean, if you are, then you cannot have players like Scotty Barnes and Pascal Siakam taking a large chunk of your shots. And also, I mean, I wouldn't put it past them to be top 15 either, because I think Darko's system really, really does lend itself to shooting. And there's a lot of really good shooters on this team. They didn't shoot well last year, and some of them shot historically poorly last year.
I think they can be better than what people expect. I wouldn't expect them to be better, but I think this kind of could be a case of addition by subtraction with Fred and Nick Nurse.
He is by far your best 3-point shooter. So, regardless of what the numbers say, you have lost something very significant. But I also think that he's also one of the biggest reasons for why your other 3-point shooters struggled. So,
I look at what
basketball in a vacuum is difficult. It's
sure,
not 2K,
yeah,
right?
And no, absolutely. I kind of look at the Celtics with Kyrie Irving, and when he left, everyone said they were cooked, right?
Exactly.
They
That's a really good example.
And
And Kyrie's a hell of a lot better than Fred VanVleet.
yeah. And
So,
I again, I'm not betting on them to be better this year, but I could see that.
I am.
Like, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I
I would put the over under at about 43 wins. I expect them to win 43 wins. I
wouldn't
expect
be
them to be good.
surprised. I wouldn't be surprised.
There's a lot of pride on the
know?
line, being tossed under the bus. A lot of guys didn't get opportunities. This new coach being willing to hear them out, give them opportunities, believe in them. I know it sounds like a bit of a fairy tale and maybe, a bit of a Disney fairy tale type of thing where, oh my God, the kumbaya and the vibe. But I don't think people understand just how bad the locker room tension was last year.
No,
And I
you
have
can
seen,
you can sense it.
I have literally, like, you want a really clear example of the difference between one player from one situation to another. Look at Kristaps Porzingis in his first season with Dallas in terms of playoffs, and look at him in his last season in Dallas, and his stats are flipped. It's insane how different he can be. And then look at him back in Washington. That second year where he was just really not happy with his role in the offense. The offense was not working for him. Him and Rick Carlisle were butting heads. It just did not work for him. And he is a significantly more talented player than 99% of your roster. And I don't think that's saying anything. He offensively, at least, he's a very talented player. He struggled, and
I have a question for you, Rob, and then
Sure.
you're making good points here. So going continuing on with addition by subtraction and changing, how a change in the locker room can affect the on-court product. Do you think it was a better move trading for Pirtle down the stretch as opposed to selling off on Fred? And you can even, lump Gary in there too. And I love Gary. I'm glad he's back. Knowing
Man,
what we know now,
I would have obviously sold at the deadline. I would do that largely because of two reasons: Scoot Henderson, Victor Wembanyama, and that's where my calculus differs from Masai Ujiri's, because even a 6% chance at one of those two players or an 8% chance at one of those two players significantly shifts the odds away from anything of value I can get from Pascal and Fred. The difference is I did not draft Pascal and Fred. I did not win a championship with Pascal and Fred. I am not obliged to their agents or to their families or to them. Moving those guys at that stage or asking them to sit out when they had a contract on the line would be very difficult. Asking Nick Nurse to purposely lose games when he's heading into a contract negotiation, I think this is one of those terrible situations that didn't work out. And you can tell me, I don't think anyone could stand on a credible
all this
boss.
tells me though is that
Let me just finish. I don't think that anyone who could have seen this team finish 48 wins and make a competitive series out of that Sixers series, granted without Fred, without Gary, without Pascal, without Fred, without Gary, and with Scotty limping. I don't think that anyone would have foreseen that team with a boost in the arm, with an entire offseason to integrate, training camp, with the expected benefit of growth from Scotty and OG, given that they are younger players on your roster, and Gary's also younger. That internal growth that was supposed to factor for 8 to 10 wins just never came. And I think that they walked into last season expecting to win 55 games. And therefore,
I walked into last season expecting them to win 55 games, but I knew there was a point of no return where it wasn't going to happen. And I knew, at the trade deadline, the writing was on the wall. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. And I mean, maybe the benefit that you and I perhaps have is that we don't talk to Fred VanVleet every day. And we don't talk to Pascal Siakam every day, and we don't talk to their agents, and we don't see them in practice.
Masai Ujiri is a better human being than, let's say, Joe Cronin, who convinced Damian Lillard to sit out for back-to-back years, and Damian Lillard.
But Dame was not in a contract year. This is a very difficult situation when you are basically mandating that a player not only sit out so that you can effectively replace them. Right? Please understand that Scoot Henderson comes in. Fred VanVleet's spot on this team is gone.
Yeah.
So not only are you asking them to sit out for someone that's eventually going to come in as a cheaper replacement, you're also asking them to do so, therefore killing their entire market value. The difference here is if they had accepted the contract extensions put forth to them at the beginning of the year, and for Pascal, that was a 3-year extension. For Fred, that was a 4-year extension, I believe, 4 years, 114. If they had signed on the dotted line, which they had no reason to, and they chose not to because they believed they were worth more, then this would be a non-issue. You would tell them to sit out. They've already been paid. It doesn't matter. And voila. But they hadn't been paid. The contract negotiation was still up in the air. And they had a number in mind that you were not willing to match. For Pascal, it was a supermax, which he would not even qualify for if he doesn't make All-NBA. And for Fred, it was probably a number north of, I believe the number quoted was 130. He wanted Tyler Hero money, and he ended up getting more.
Yep.
So look, at the end of the day, I'm trying to say that at that point, if you go up to these guys and say, we are trading you or we are sitting you, neither of those conversations are going to go well with most of your roster.
But here's the thing. Fred and Pascal made the choice not to accept those offers, and that's on them, right? I mean, that's great. They did.
Is
what
that
they
not a
thought
valid? Is that? But are they not?
That's
right?
valid. It's they're completely.
If Pascal,
they should get every.
if Pascal
Oh,
really
yeah.
believes he's a top 5, top 10
I have
player in the
nothing
NBA,
against that. Yeah, they
why
should
should he
get
take
their.
a 3?
I completely agree. He's doing what's best for him. I all the power to both of them for making their choices, but they are their choices, right? So they made.
What does
their
that even
choi-
mean?
It means that, like, okay,
They made a choice to believe that they were worth more. Now,
yeah,
if they believe
they made a
that
choice
okay,
that
and they were your 2 best players last year, statistically. You cannot technically, without getting into loopy conspiracies, peg the failures of the roster on them. Now, I can do that because, apparently I'm the Alex Jones of Raptors YouTube, but most people cannot. Okay, most people cannot logically say, hey, the guy who's averaging 26 points per game and 7 rebounds and 8 assists and was, on pace to be a soft MVP candidate, and the guy who's leading our team in box plus minus, yeah, those are the problems. You can't do that. So what they went, I believe what happened is they said to Masai Ujiri, you've given us a roster that's too young. This young guy, Scotty Barnes, has not improved. You bet the horse on him. You held out on him. And now the pressure's on you. Give us a guy who can actually space the court and shoot and, and or play center for us. And then he decided to concede and gave them Jakob Poeltl. Now, this is look, dealing with highly manipulative people, in my opinion, whether it be agents, whether it be Fred, whether it be Fred's people, camp, whatever, is never easy. It's never easy. And you can say that Masai Ujiri should have been cutthroat, but then to do that, he would have become a person that I know him not to be. So, he's paying he's paying the price right now. He's paying the price of trusting somebody. He's paying the price of,
he
being a genuinely good person.
Yeah.
But in the end, I respect him more for doing this way, even though I'm not as happy with the result, because I, again, am cutthroat. I am a good person, but I am cutthroat. So I would, and I don't like Fred. So that's very easy for me to be very cutthroat. But would it be easy for me to be cutthroat with Scotty? No, not at all. You think if, let's say the previous year didn't go as well as we were expecting, and, he's in the running for rookie of the year, would I have the heart to shut him down for the last 10 games, to lose more games in order to cost him rookie of the year, knowing what that could mean for him? No, I wouldn't have the heart to do that. It's very difficult when these players stop being players and they become human beings. It's very difficult. Anyways, Charles, great conversation. Thanks a lot for calling.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call, Rob.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. All right, final caller, Robert. Oh, that actually isn't a caller at all. That was just the previous video. Okay, that's great. Okay, great. Thank y'all for tuning in. Sorry, I was assuming that was a caller the entire time, but it's just the video that I played in the beginning. Someone saying Lauren Woods Poverty Center. That's funny. Thank y'all for supporting this channel, for always rocking with us. It's really cool. I've been having a lot of discussions with NBA people and people within the basketball world in general. Some really big brands have reached out, just opening conversations about what do you need, what are you interested in, what are your plans for this channel and stuff. And it's always such a source of pride when I can tell them, hey man, whether we do these lives at 6 p.m., 8 p.m., 2 a.m., there's always like 200, 300 people, you know? So it's really cool. Anyways, yeah. Anyways, to anyone who called in that we may have missed, I apologize. We'll definitely try to get y'all on the next one. We'll try to do another live this weekend. There are some videos. I've been a very, very slow person in terms of editing the last few days. I've been trying to get the hard drive together and trying to get it all organized so that video production becomes really smooth. But yeah, so hopefully that will be out next week. There's Scotty Analytics video, Christian Coloco Analytics video breakdown and stuff. So these videos are going to be fun, and I'm looking forward to doing more short form content as well. Someone, you know, that I spoke to was really smart in this YouTube content space, was just like, bro, you need to do like more of these 8-minute, 9-minute quick hitters. Like people, you know, some people have tuned out to these, you know, 1 hour, 2 hour lives. So I appreciate those of you who watch it. I appreciate those of you who contribute, who participate, and hope that you've got something of value and that you can subscribe and, you know, hit a like on your way out. That would be really incredible. 261 people here. If you can hit like, I would very much appreciate it. All right. Thank you guys, and excited to see analytics videos. Yes. When's your next live? Hopefully Sunday. But look, I don't want to be the person who just gets on and says, hey, there's no news, so it's good news. Like, I would like to actually explore a topic in depth. I think we have gone in depth in this topic. In an hour and 40 minutes, I believe we have comprehensively looked at, hopefully intelligently, a really big topic around Raptor space, which I appreciate. I don't want to be coming out and saying, you know, Pascal Siakam followed this guy or didn't follow this guy on Instagram, and therefore, you know, it's great news. And then let's talk about that for 2 hours. That feels like a waste of my time. It feels like a waste of your time. Don't want to really do that. So anyways, peace, guys. Have a good one. Subscribe, hit the like. Peace.